Hi, I'm Beverly, 28 years old, and I thought I was helping my family by living in my childhood home and paying rent to my parents. For 3 years, I dutifully handed over $800 every month, thinking this arrangement worked for everyone. I maintained my space, helped with chores, and felt secure knowing I was contributing to the household while saving money in Phoenix's expensive rental market. What I didn't expect was how they'd use my loyalty against me when my brother needed a place to crash with his entire family. Before I share what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, you won't believe how this family drama unfolded and how I finally stood up for myself. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything fell apart. As a medical billing specialist in Phoenix, Arizona, I made $42,000 yearly. Not rich by any means, but steady enough to afford my $800 monthly rent to my parents, Harold and Agnes. I lived in the converted basement apartment of their two-story colonial home on Maple Street, a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other. The arrangement seemed perfect. I had my own entrance, a small kitchenette, and enough space for my furniture. Every month, like clockwork, I'd write that rent check and hand it to my dad with a smile. I never missed a payment, not once in 3 years. Beyond rent, I paid my share of utilities, kept the basement spotless, and helped maintain the yard every weekend. My routine was simple but satisfying. I'd wake up, drive 20 minutes to the medical center where I worked, spend 8 hours processing insurance claims and patient billing, then come home to my quiet basement sanctuary. Twice a week, I'd join my parents for dinner upstairs, sharing stories about work and catching up on family news. Mom would cook her famous pot roast, and Dad would tell his old jokes that somehow never got old. I was saving money too. Phoenix rent prices were climbing every year, with one-bedroom apartments averaging $1,200 to $1,500 monthly. My arrangement with my parents let me sock away $300 each month into my savings account. My goal was $20,000 for a down payment on my own place, maybe a small condo in Tempe or Scottsdale. My relationship with my parents felt solid. I was the responsible daughter, the one they could count on. When Mom needed rides to her doctor appointments for her arthritis, I was there. When Dad's back went out and he couldn't mow the lawn, I handled it without being asked. I thought this made me valuable to them, someone they appreciated having around. But my brother Clarence was a different story. 2 years older than me, he'd always been the family favorite despite his string of financial disasters. At 30, he'd already filed for bankruptcy, once lost 2 cars to repossession, and bounced between jobs like a pinball. His wife Sandra seemed nice enough, but she had expensive tastes that didn't match their income level. Their twin 5-year-old daughters, Donna and Linda, were sweet kids who deserved better stability than their parents provided. Recently, I'd noticed my parents acting strange. They'd have hushed conversations in the kitchen that would stop abruptly when I walked in. Dad would quickly change the subject, and Mom would busy herself washing dishes that were already clean. I figured they were planning a surprise for someone's birthday or anniversary. I never imagined they were plotting against me. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The way they asked detailed questions about my work schedule, how much I had in savings, whether I planned to move out anytime soon. I answered honestly because I trusted them completely. That trust was about to cost me everything. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Tuesday evening in March. I came home from work to find both parents sitting at the kitchen table with expressions I'd never seen before. Dad's hands were folded, Mom was wringing a dish towel, and neither was making eye contact with me. "Beverly, honey, we need to talk," Mom said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. My heart started racing. Were they sick? Getting divorced? Selling the house? I sat down, preparing for the worst. "It's about Clarence," Dad began, his voice careful and measured. "He and Sandra are going through a really tough time right now." Relief flooded through me. This wasn't about my parents' health or marriage. What kind of tough time? He lost his job at Miller's Auto Repair last week. Mom explained. The shop is downsizing, and with his seniority level, he was one of the first to go. I felt genuinely sorry for my brother. That's terrible. I know he really liked working there. Sandra's part-time job at Target isn't nearly enough to cover their apartment rent, Dad continued. They're looking at eviction within the month if they can't come up with $1,800. The number hit me like a punch. $1,800 for rent, and they had twin 5-year-olds to consider. What are they going to do? Mom leaned forward, her eyes finally meeting mine. We've offered to let them stay here temporarily, just until Clarence can find another job and get back on his feet. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this meant, even if they hadn't said it yet. Stay here, all 4 of them. It's just for a few months, Dad said quickly. Family helps family, Beverly. You know that. I did know that. It was drilled into me since childhood. When family needed help, you helped. No questions asked. But 4 additional people in a house that already felt cramped with 3 adults. Where would they sleep? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Clarence and Sandra would take the main guest bedroom upstairs, Mom explained. The girls could share your old childhood room. We've still got your twin beds in there. I nodded slowly, trying to process this information. My old room was right above the basement, so I'd hear every footstep, every conversation, every late-night cry from the girls. Privacy would become a memory. I understand it's not ideal, Dad said, reading my expression. But it's temporary, and those little girls need stability right now. How could I say no? These were my nieces, my brother's children. If I refused, I'd be the selfish aunt who let her family become homeless. The guilt would eat me alive. Of course, I heard myself saying. Family helps family. Mom's face brightened immediately. Oh, Beverly, thank you so much. This means the world to all of us. When would they move in? I asked. This weekend, if that's okay, Dad replied. We want to get them settled before the girls have to change schools or anything drastic like that. A week later, I watched Clarence back a moving truck into our driveway. Not a small U-Haul, but a full-size moving truck that suggested this was more than a temporary relocation. My brother and Sandra directed the movers with the efficiency of people who'd done this before, which made sense given their history of evictions and sudden moves. As I helped carry boxes upstairs, I noticed things that didn't match their supposed financial crisis. Sandra's collection of designer purses worth hundreds of dollars each. Clarence's brand-new gaming console still in the box with a $400 price tag. Cases of expensive wine and premium coffee that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Finally getting a break from rent payments, Clarence joked as he carried a flat-screen television past me. This is going to be sweet. The casual way he said it sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't treating this like an emergency housing situation. He sounded like someone who'd just scored a free vacation rental. But I pushed down my concerns. Maybe these expensive items were purchased before his job loss. Maybe they were gifts from friends or family. I was probably being paranoid and judgmental during my brother's crisis. That night, as I lay in my basement bedroom listening to the furniture being rearranged above my head, I tried to convince myself this arrangement would work out fine. It was temporary. Family helps family. Everything would be back to normal in a few months. I had no idea how wrong I was. 2 weeks after Clarence's family settled in, my parents called me upstairs for what they termed a family meeting. The serious tone in Dad's voice made my stomach clench with the same anxiety I'd felt during their initial announcement. I found them at the kitchen table again, but this time, Mom had a yellow legal pad covered in her neat handwriting. Numbers and calculations filled the page with totals circled in red ink. Beverly, we need to discuss the household finances, Dad began without preamble. My mouth went dry. What about them? Mom turned the legal pad toward me, pointing to the various line items. Having 4 additional people in the house has increased our expenses dramatically. I scanned the list. Groceries had jumped from $250 monthly to $400. The water bill doubled from $60 to $120. Electric costs rose from $140 to $220 monthly. Internet and cable increased to accommodate more users and devices. I can see the expenses have gone up, I said carefully. But what does this have to do with me? Dad cleared his throat. We need you to pay $1,600 monthly now to help cover the additional costs. The number hit me like a physical blow. $1,600? That's double what I've been paying for 3 years. The math is right there, Mom said, tapping the legal pad. These increases are real, Beverly. We can't absorb them on our fixed income. I stared at the numbers, trying to process this demand. But I'm not the one who invited 4 more people to live here. Why should I pay for their expenses? Because you're the one with a steady income and no children to support, Dad replied, matter-of-factly. Clarence is actively looking for work, but job hunting takes time. What about Sandra? Couldn't she pick up more hours at Target? Mom's expression hardened. Those little girls need their mother available for school pickup and homework help. Sandra can't work full-time right now. The unfairness of the situation crashed over me like a wave. I was being asked to financially support my brother's entire family while they contributed nothing to the household expenses. This doesn't seem right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Clarence and Sandra are getting free housing, free utilities, free everything. I'm the only one paying rent, and now you want me to pay double now. Family sacrifices for family. Dad said, using the phrase that had controlled my decisions my entire life. Sometimes the person who can carry the load has to carry it. But for how long? I pressed. How long am I expected to support all of them? Until Clarence gets back on his feet, Mom replied vaguely. However long that takes. The open-ended commitment terrified me. Clarence's track record suggested getting back on his feet could take months or even years. I'd be financially trapped watching my savings disappear while subsidizing my brother's family indefinitely. What if I can't afford $1,600 a month? I asked. Dad's expression turned cold. Then maybe you should consider finding somewhere else to live. We can't force you to stay here if the arrangement doesn't work for you anymore. The threat was clear. Pay double rent or get out. After 3 years of reliable payments, helpful maintenance, and family support, they were ready to kick me out the moment I questioned their demands. I felt cornered and manipulated, but what choice did I have? Finding a new apartment would require first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, and moving costs. That would drain my entire savings account and leave me financially vulnerable. I need time to adjust my budget, I said finally. Of course, Mom said, her voice sweetening now that I'd agreed. We understand this is a big change. Just have the $1,600 ready by the 1st of next month. As I walked back down to my basement apartment, my mind was reeling. Something about this whole situation felt orchestrated, planned rather than spontaneous. But I couldn't prove anything, and accusing my parents of manipulation would only make things worse. I spent that night researching apartment rentals online just to see what my options were. One-bedroom places in decent neighborhoods started at $1,200 monthly, not including utilities. Even if I could afford to move out, I'd be paying nearly the same amount for a smaller space with none of the family connection. I was trapped, and I suspected my parents knew it. The next morning, I wrote the first $1,600 check with a heavy heart. As I handed it to Dad, I noticed a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Not relief or gratitude, but satisfaction, like a chess player who just executed a successful strategy. That's when I started planning my escape. Living in the house became unbearable almost immediately after I started paying double rent. Clarence treated the place like he owned it, rearranging furniture without asking and leaving his belongings scattered throughout the common areas. He'd claimed the main living room as his personal gaming den, setting up his console and surround sound system that blasted action movies until well past midnight. Sandra took over the kitchen, completely throwing out my clearly labeled food from the refrigerator and replacing it with organic name-brand items that cost 3 times as much. When I politely asked her to respect my food storage, she rolled her eyes and said, "There's barely any room as it is. Maybe keep your stuff in your basement area." The twin girls, Donna and Linda, were sweet kids, but their constant presence meant I had no peaceful space outside my basement room. They'd taken over the backyard with elaborate play sets, the living room with their toys and cartoons, and even the front porch with their bicycles and chalk drawings. Every surface in the house bore evidence of their occupancy. My parents defended every aspect of this chaos. When I complained about Clarence's midnight gaming sessions, Dad said, "He's stressed about the job hunt. Let him blow off steam." When I mentioned Sandra's kitchen takeover, Mom replied, "She's feeding 4 people. Of course she needs more space." Every concern I raised was dismissed, minimized, or turned back on me as selfishness. I was paying $1,600 monthly to live like an unwelcome guest in my childhood home. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was coming home from work early due to a power outage at the medical center when I heard Clarence on the phone in the backyard. His voice carried clearly through my basement window. "Yeah, man, it's perfect," he was saying to whoever was on the other end. "Free housing, free utilities, and my sister's covering all the extra costs. I'm basically getting paid to live here." My blood turned to ice. Getting paid to live here. "The unemployment checks are just bonus money now," Clarence continued. "Sandra and I are thinking about taking a vacation to Vegas with what we're saving." Unemployment checks. My brother was collecting unemployment benefits while claiming to be desperately job hunting. He was getting government assistance while living rent-free and having all his expenses covered by my doubled payments. I quietly moved closer to the window to hear more. "My parents are genius at this stuff," Clarence said with a laugh. "They've got Beverly convinced this is temporary family help, but we could milk this for years if we play it right. Years. They were planning to exploit me for years. The best part is Beverly's too nice to kick up a real fuss," he continued. "She'll pay whatever they ask because she doesn't want to seem like a bad daughter." I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't a family emergency. It was a calculated scam, and I was the target. That evening, I started paying closer attention to my brother's alleged job hunting activities. He left the house every Tuesday and Thursday, claiming to have interviews or meetings with potential employers. But his stories never added up. The companies he mentioned didn't exist when I looked them up online. The interview times he described conflicted with business hours. On Thursday, I followed him discreetly after taking a sick day from work. Instead of driving to any business district, Clarence went straight to the Lucky Strike Casino on the outskirts of Phoenix. He spent 4 hours inside, emerging with the relaxed demeanor of someone who'd been playing slots and drinking free beverages. This was his job hunting, gambling with unemployment money while I worked 40-hour weeks to subsidize his lifestyle. I also discovered that Sandra wasn't as financially strapped as they'd claimed. Her Instagram account, which she apparently forgot I could see, was filled with recent purchases. New clothes, expensive makeup, restaurant meals, concert tickets. She was living better as my financial dependent than I was as the person paying all the bills. The final straw came when I found paperwork that Clarence had carelessly left on the kitchen counter. It was an apartment application dated 3 months before his supposed job loss. He'd been planning to move out of his previous place regardless of his employment situation. The eviction story was completely fabricated. My brother had never lost his job unexpectedly. He'd quit or been fired, then convinced our parents to help him execute this elaborate scheme to get free housing and financial support from me. I felt betrayed by every person I'd trusted most in the world. My parents weren't innocent victims of circumstance helping their struggling son. They were active participants in a plan to exploit their daughter's sense of family loyalty. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to get out of this situation, but not in the way my family expected. I was going to disappear completely, taking their financial safety net with me. And I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their choices. The apartment complex in Tempe wasn't fancy, but it represented freedom. Garden Vista Apartments offered one-bedroom units for $950 monthly, including water and trash service. After seeing 3 different places, I submitted my application with first month's rent security deposit and application fee totaling $2,800. My credit score of 740 made approval quick and easy. Within 48 hours, I had keys to apartment 215, a ground floor unit with a small patio and assigned parking space. The manager. A friendly woman named Ruth said I could move in any time within the next 2 weeks. I planned everything with military precision. My family had routines that made timing predictable. Every Saturday morning, they all went to Donna and Linda's soccer games at the community center. The games lasted 3 hours, giving me a perfect window for my escape. I rented a moving truck for Saturday morning pickup, scheduled utility transfers for the same day, and arranged to change my mailing address effective immediately. At work, I updated my emergency contact information and home address in the HR system. I wanted no trail leading back to my family's house. The hardest part was packing without arousing suspicion. Each evening after work, I'd load a few boxes into my car trunk, taking them to a storage unit I'd rented across town. Clothes, books, kitchen items, anything I could transport in small loads without being noticed. I discovered how little actually belonged to me in that house. Most of the furniture had been purchased by my parents years earlier. The bed dresser and desk in my basement room were mine, along with a small television and microwave. 3 years of living there and my personal belongings fit into 8 boxes and a few pieces of furniture. Friday night brought the final family dinner before my departure. Mom made her pot roast again, and everyone gathered around the table like a Norman Rockwell painting of domestic happiness. The irony was suffocating. "Beverly, you've been quiet lately," Dad observed as he carved the meat. "Everything okay at work?" "Just busy season," I replied, cutting my food into small pieces to avoid having to talk much. "I had a great interview this week," Clarence announced, which I knew was a lie since I'd watched him spend Wednesday afternoon at a sports bar. "Company called Johnson Industries. They're really interested in my automotive experience." Johnson Industries didn't exist. I'd checked. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom gushed. "Maybe you'll have good news soon." "Sandra and I were thinking about taking the girls to see my sister in California next weekend," he continued. "You know, a little family vacation before I start the new job. A vacation funded by unemployment benefits and my $1,600 rent payments." The audacity was breathtaking. "Sounds nice," I managed to say. "You should come with us," Sandra suggested with fake enthusiasm. "It would be fun to have the whole family together." The whole family. As if I wasn't the one financing their lifestyle while being treated like an unwelcome boarder. "I have to work," I said simply. After dinner, I helped with dishes one last time, listening to my parents plan weekend activities around the soccer game schedule. They had no idea this was our last evening together as a family unit. In my basement room that night, I packed the final items into 2 suitcases and wrote the letter that would serve as my resignation from their exploitation scheme. I wanted them to understand exactly why I was leaving and exactly what their behavior had cost them. The letter was 3 pages long, typed and printed on official letterhead from my computer. I included documentation of every lie I'd uncovered, every manipulation I'd identified, and every dollar I'd paid under false pretenses. Bank statements, screenshots of Clarence's social media posts, copies of his unemployment benefits, statements that I'd photographed while he was at the casino. I ended with a simple statement: "I refuse to be your family's ATM any longer. You taught me that family helps family, but you forgot to teach me that family doesn't exploit family. I'm helping myself now." At the bottom, I included my security deposit receipt for the new apartment, showing them I'd found an affordable option without needing to exploit anyone else. Saturday morning came with clear skies and perfect moving weather. I watched from my window as the family loaded into Dad's SUV for the soccer games, Sandra carrying snacks and Mom bringing folding chairs. They'd be gone for hours. 30 minutes later, the moving truck arrived. The movers were efficient and professional, loading my belongings in less than 2 hours. I did a final walkthrough of the basement apartment, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. The space looked oddly larger without my personal touches, like a hotel room after checkout. I placed my letter on the kitchen counter where it couldn't be missed, weighted down with my old house key. The symbolism felt appropriate, returning their key while explaining why they'd lost my trust. At my new apartment, unpacking felt like emerging from underwater and taking the first real breath in months. Every item I placed in my own space reinforced my independence. My coffee maker on my counter, my books on my shelves, my food in my refrigerator. The first call came at 2:30 p.m. just as I was assembling my bed frame. "Beverly, where are you?" Mom's voice was tight with panic. "I'm at my new place," I said calmly, continuing to sort through hardware screws. "New place? What new place? We came home, and all your stuff is gone. Did you find my letter?" A pause. "We're reading it now. Beverly, this is insane. You can't just leave like this." "I can, and I did. We're your family. You don't abandon family over money." The word abandon hit like a slap. I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped allowing myself to be financially abused. Dad's voice came on the line as he took the phone from Mom. "You get back here right now, young lady. We had an agreement." "We had an agreement that I'd pay $800 rent," I replied. "You changed that agreement without consulting me. I'm changing it again." "You're being selfish and ungrateful," he said, his voice rising. "After everything we've done for you." "After everything you've done to me," I corrected. "I know about Clarence's unemployment benefits. I know about the fake job interviews. I know this whole thing was planned." Silence on the other end. "You read the letter," I continued. "You know I have documentation of everything. The lies, the manipulation, the financial exploitation, all of it. Those are serious accusations." Dad said, his tone shifting to something more cautious. "They're serious facts, with serious evidence." Another long pause. I could hear heated whispering in the background, probably my parents conferring with Clarence and Sandra about damage control. Mom came back on the line, her voice now pleading rather than angry. "Beverly, honey, let's talk about this. Come home and we'll work something out." "I am home," I said, looking around my bright new living room. "This is my home now. You can't afford to live on your own. You know that." "Actually, I can. My rent here is $950 monthly. Even with utilities, I'm paying less than half what you were demanding." "What about your savings? What about your future plans?" "What about them? I'll have more money for savings now that I'm not subsidizing Clarence's casino trips and Sandra's shopping sprees." Sharp intake of breath. "How dare you accuse your brother of—" "I have photos," I interrupted. "Time-stamped photos of Clarence at Lucky Strike Casino during his supposed job interviews. I have screenshots of Sandra's Instagram showing her recent purchases. I have copies of his unemployment statements." The line went quiet, except for muffled arguing in the background. "This conversation is over," Dad said finally. "If you want to be selfish and destroy this family, that's your choice. But don't expect us to welcome you back when your little tantrum ends." "This isn't a tantrum," I said. "This is me choosing self-respect over family dysfunction. And I won't be coming back." I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. Within minutes, text messages started flooding in from extended family members as the drama spread through our relatives' group chats. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends weighed in with opinions about my character, my obligations, and my ingratitude. I blocked them too. By evening, Sandra had posted a long Facebook rant about family betrayal and abandonment, painting me as a heartless sister who left her innocent nieces homeless. The post garnered dozens of sympathetic comments from people who didn't know the full story. I didn't respond or defend myself publicly. The people who mattered would ask for my side directly. The people who believed one-sided social media drama weren't worth my energy. That first night in my own space, I ordered pizza, and sat on my floor eating directly from the box while surrounded by unpacked boxes. It was the most peaceful meal I'd had in months. 3 days later, I learned that my parents had given Clarence and Sandra 30 days to find alternative housing. Without my $1,600 monthly payments, they couldn't afford to support 4 additional family members on their fixed retirement income. The reality of their financial situation hit them exactly as hard as I'd calculated it would. 6 months later, my life had transformed completely. Living in my own space restored my mental health, my financial stability, and my sense of personal autonomy. The $950 rent plus utilities totaled $1,100 monthly, saving me $500 compared to my parents' exploitative demands. I used that extra money to rebuild my emergency fund and enjoy small luxuries I'd forgotten I wanted. A Netflix subscription, weekend trips to Sedona, dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford when I was subsidizing my brother's family. I joined a hiking group and started dating Thomas, a respiratory therapist from my medical center, who respected my independence and boundaries. My savings account grew steadily for the first time in months. Instead of watching my financial future disappear into my family's exploitation scheme, I was building toward real goals again. The down payment for my own condo was back within reach. The family fallout played out exactly as I'd expected. Mom called twice in the first month, trying different emotional manipulation tactics. First, guilt about abandoning my nieces. Then anger about disrespecting my parents. Finally, fake health scares designed to make me feel obligated to return. I didn't respond to any of it. Dad never called at all, which confirmed his threat about not welcoming me back wasn't empty bluster. He'd genuinely written me off as disposable the moment I stopped being financially useful. Clarence and Sandra were forced to find jobs and a smaller apartment within their actual means. According to my cousin Marie, who stayed neutral in the family drama, they ended up in a 2-bedroom place in a less desirable neighborhood. Sandra had to take a full-time retail position, and Clarence found work at a different auto shop for lower pay than his previous job. Their twins adjusted to the new reality better than the adults did. Kids are resilient when their basic needs are met, even if their parents have to make financial sacrifices. My parents struggled with the sudden reality of their fixed income limitations. They'd been living beyond their means with my subsidies, and losing that income forced them to make uncomfortable budget adjustments. They canceled their cable package, stopped eating out regularly, and had to defer some home maintenance projects. Agnes attempted one reconciliation call in month 3, but the conversation revealed no genuine understanding of why I'd left. She focused entirely on how my departure had affected everyone else, never acknowledging the financial abuse or manipulation I'd documented. "We miss you," she said, which felt hollow given that they'd been willing to exploit me indefinitely. "You miss my money," I replied. "That's not the same thing." "That's not fair, Beverly. We're your parents." "Parents don't financially exploit their children," I said. "Parents don't manipulate their children into subsidizing other family members' irresponsible choices. We were trying to keep the family together. You were trying to keep your budget balanced at my expense." The conversation ended with no resolution and no plans for future contact. I started therapy to process the childhood patterns that had made me vulnerable to their manipulation. Dr. Patricia Gonzalez helped me understand how years of conditioning had taught me to equate my worth with my willingness to sacrifice for others' poor choices. Healthy families support each other through genuine emergencies, she explained during one session. Unhealthy families create ongoing crises to justify permanent exploitation. The difference became crystal clear. My family hadn't needed temporary help during a crisis. They'd created a permanent system where my financial responsibility enabled everyone else's financial irresponsibility. Through therapy, I learned to recognize the patterns I'd been taught to accept as normal. The guilt trips designed to override my logical objections. The financial emergencies that always seemed to require my money, but never anyone else's sacrifices. The way my concerns were dismissed while everyone else's needs were prioritized. I also connected with online support groups for adults dealing with family financial abuse. I discovered my situation wasn't unique. Thousands of people shared stories about relatives who demanded money, housing, or financial support while contributing nothing in return. Reading their experiences validated my decision and helped me understand the long-term damage of staying in exploitative family systems. People who'd spent decades subsidizing irresponsible relatives often ended up financially ruined themselves with no retirement savings and nothing to show for their sacrifices except resentment and exhaustion. I'd escaped before reaching that point. My new perspective on family relationships focused on reciprocity rather than obligation. Healthy family help flows both directions based on genuine need and ability to assist. Unhealthy family help flows one direction based on guilt manipulation and exploitation. I began mentoring young women through my church about financial independence and family boundaries. Too many people, especially women, were taught that saying no to family financial demands made them selfish or ungrateful. Your money is your life energy, I'd tell them. Every dollar you earn represents hours of your life you can never get back. Don't let anyone convince you that protecting your life energy is selfish. 1 year after my escape, I received an unexpected letter from my niece Donna, now 6 years old. She'd drawn a picture of our family with stick figures and asked in her careful handwriting why Aunt Beverly didn't visit anymore. The letter broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. Donna and Linda deserve to grow up understanding healthy family dynamics, not learning that love comes with financial obligations and manipulation tactics. I wrote back to Donna explaining in age-appropriate terms that sometimes adults need to live in different places, but that doesn't mean they stop caring about each other. I included a gift card for art supplies and my phone number for when she got older and could understand more complex family dynamics. I never heard from my parents again. 2 years after my escape, I'm living a life I could never have imagined while trapped in my family's exploitation scheme. I bought my own condo in Scottsdale, a beautiful 2-bedroom place with a balcony overlooking the mountains. Thomas and I got engaged last month, and we're planning a small wedding focused on our shared values of honesty, respect, and financial responsibility. My savings account reflects the financial stability that comes from protecting my own interests instead of subsidizing other people's poor choices. I contribute to my retirement fund, maintain an emergency fund, and still have money left over for the life experiences I value. I've also learned to spot manipulation tactics immediately. When Thomas's brother asked to borrow $5,000 last year, I helped Thomas recognize the red flags and set appropriate boundaries. The brother found alternative solutions when easy money wasn't available, proving that artificial financial emergencies disappear when the target refuses to be exploited. My relationship with Thomas is built on partnership and mutual respect. We split expenses fairly based on our income, support each other's individual goals, and make financial decisions together. Neither of us expects the other to sacrifice their financial future for external family obligations. Through my church mentoring program, I've helped dozens of young women recognize and escape various forms of family financial abuse. The patterns are remarkably consistent across different families and backgrounds. Guilt-based manipulation, artificial emergencies, exploitation disguised as temporary help, and retaliation when the target sets boundaries. The most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's dysfunction, I tell them. Enabling irresponsible behavior doesn't help anyone in the long run. Recently, my cousin Marie shared news about my parents and Clarence's family. Mom and Dad are managing on their actual retirement income, having learned to live within their means. They've developed a closer relationship with their neighbors and joined some senior center activities. Clarence and Sandra's marriage didn't survive the transition to financial responsibility. They divorced last year, sharing custody of Donna and Linda. Clarence is paying child support and working steadily at the auto shop, apparently having learned that job security matters more than easy money. Sandra remarried a man who owns a successful plumbing business. According to Marie, She's much happier with someone who can provide the lifestyle she wants through legitimate work rather than family exploitation. The twins are thriving despite their parents' divorce. They're both excellent students who participate in school activities and seem well adjusted to their new family structure. I feel no satisfaction in my family's struggles, but I also feel no guilt about protecting myself from their exploitation. Their financial problems were created by their choices, not by my refusal to subsidize those choices indefinitely. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed and continued paying their demands. Would Clarence have ever found legitimate work? Would my parents have ever acknowledged their manipulation? Would I have ended up financially ruined with nothing to show for my sacrifices? The questions answer themselves. People who benefit from exploitation rarely choose to end that exploitation voluntarily. I would have remained trapped until my financial resources were completely exhausted. My therapist helped me understand that my family's reaction to my boundary setting revealed their true priorities. Parents who genuinely cared about my well-being would have been concerned about my financial stress and emotional exhaustion. Instead, they were angry about losing access to my money. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, Dr. Gonzalez reminded me frequently. Your family showed you that your value to them was purely financial. That recognition was painful but liberating. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come, and acknowledgement that would never happen. I focused on building a life based on my own values and priorities. The woman I am today wouldn't recognize the person who wrote $800 rent checks while being grateful for the privilege of helping her family. That woman had been conditioned to believe that her worth came from her willingness to sacrifice for others, regardless of whether those others deserved or appreciated her sacrifices. This woman knows that self-respect and financial boundaries aren't selfish. They're essential for building genuine relationships based on mutual care rather than exploitation. I still believe that family should help family, but I've redefined what that means. Real family help is reciprocal, temporary, and based on genuine need rather than artificial crisis. Real family doesn't punish you for having boundaries or retaliate when you refuse to be exploited. Most importantly, I've learned that choosing your own peace and financial security over family approval isn't betrayal. It's wisdom. 3 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be completely estranged from my parents and brother, I would have been horrified. Family was everything to me, even when that family was destroying my financial future and emotional well-being. Today, I understand that toxic family relationships aren't worth preserving just because they're family. Some bridges need to be burned to protect yourself from people who would rather exploit you than respect you. I found my own place, but more importantly, I found my own voice, and I'll never let anyone silence it again. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of you financially? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, personal growth, and standing up for yourself. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your own financial future, even from family members who claim to love you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to refuse to enable dysfunction. I hope my experience helps you recognize that you deserve relationships built on respect, not exploitation. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.